And we are back with another edition of American Football News. This is the NCAA version of American Football News, and here we go. All right, so today is Tuesday, and the College Football Playoff Committee has released its top 4 teams for the College Football Playoff selection, and to nobody's surprise, it is the same 4 teams that have been in the top 4 for the last 3 weeks, and those are as follows. Number 1, as has been all year, the University of Alabama posting a perfect 11-0 record. Number 2, Clemson, also posting an 11-0 record. Number 3, Notre Dame, also undefeated with an 11-0 record. And to round out the top 4, the University of Michigan, who comes in at 10-1 and is the strongest 10-1 team on this list. The next 2 teams that are on the outside looking in, the University of Georgia and the University of Oklahoma, both respectively coming in at 5-6. Number 7 is LSU. 8, Washington State University, one of the Cinderella teams this year that a lot of people have enjoyed watching. I was able to catch their game this past weekend, and their offense is quite impressive. West Virginia comes in at number 9, and to round out the top 10 teams in the country, the University of Ohio State, who sits at 10-1 on the year, rounds out the top 10. Coming in at 11, the University of Central Florida, 12, Syracuse, 13, Florida, 14, Penn State, 15, Texas, 16, Iowa State. Yet again, one of those Cinderella-type stories this year. This team has seen a lot of success. Despite the fact that they're 6-4, they deserve to be number 16. Number 17, Kentucky, 18, Washington, 19, Utah, 20, Boston College, 21, Mississippi State, 22, Northwestern, who looks to win the Big Ten West title this upcoming weekend, 23, Utah State, 24, Cincinnati, and to round out the top 25, the Broncos from Boise State. Now, for those of you who were watching the NCAA this past weekend, you were in for a treat. You saw a lot of very good games. One of the top games that was on the docket last weekend was the Shamrock Series, featuring the University of Notre Dame and the upstart Syracuse Orange. Notre Dame traditionally now playing a home game away from South Bend. They've been doing this tradition now for 9 years. They are 9-0 in the Shamrock Series, and this particular series was played at Yankee Stadium in New York City. The Irish donning uniforms that looked similar to Yankee uniforms. Personally, I thought they were quite ugly, but to each their own. Syracuse, however, did not show up in this game, and Notre Dame was able to push them around pretty easily. This was a surprise. Syracuse has given a lot of people a lot of problems, and I don't know if it was the big lights or the big city or this a bad day for the Syracuse Orange in general, but they did fall to Notre Dame last Saturday, 36-3. A few other games that were on the schedule last week. Some came to light, some came to fall flat, but they were good games nonetheless. The closest one, the one that most people didn't see coming, Ohio State had to go to overtime to beat the Maryland Terrapins, 52-51. This could be an indication that they were looking ahead to this week's game, which is the rivalry, the Toledo War, Michigan and Ohio State, the oldest rivalry in all of college football, blah, blah, blah. This is Michigan's very biggest, toughest test this year. And personally, I think that this is going to either determine whether or not Michigan is back or whether Michigan are pretenders. Ohio State hasn't really played very well very often this season, but there have been a couple of times where Michigan's defense has literally bailed out Michigan's offense. Once again, you got to take it with a grain of salt because you have to look at the quality of opponent that the University of Michigan is playing as compared to Ohio State. Both are fairly weak, and both have beat up on a lot of weaker Big Ten teams. And the teams that they have had to play, Ohio State, not Michigan, has struggled against. So it'll be an interesting matchup this upcoming Saturday. Speaking of Big Ten, the Northwestern Wildcats, 1 game away from clinching the Big Ten West title and playing in their very first Big Ten title game, probably at the hands of the University of Michigan. They took on the Minnesota Golden Gophers this weekend and were able to win 24-14. Speaking of win, at one point in time, the Alabama Crimson Tide and the Citadel Bulldogs were tied 10-10, and the internet was absolutely abuzz with upset and upset and upset. And it never came to be because the Citadel was only able to score another touchdown, whereas the Crimson Tide easily continued their roll and were able to beat the Citadel 50-17. Now, Florida State took on the Boston College Eagles this last weekend. Florida State underplaying tremendously this year. The word is that the coach has lost his players in the locker room and that they're really just playing for themselves now, so wins are going to be few and far between. However, they were able to hold their own against Boston College, who has a very good running game. The Seminoles come out on top 22-21. This past weekend, also in the Big Ten, we saw Michigan take on the Indiana Hoosiers, who have given the Wolverines some troubles over the last several years, but can never seem to actually pull away and win. Michigan and Indiana playing neck and neck for most of the game, and then that Michigan defense simply asserted itself and took over. Wolverines beat Indiana 31-20. Now, if you are a fan of basketball, then the Duke Blue Devils are a very, very exciting team to watch right now. However, that is not true in the football world. The Duke Blue Devils took on the Clemson Tigers this past weekend, and to say that they were beaten would be an understatement. If this were a basketball game, it would make more sense for Duke to have this score. But this is football, and this is American Football News, so that's what we're going to stick with. If you caught this game, it was pretty much over with at halftime. The Clemson Tiger easily handling the Duke Blue Devils 35-6. One of our more interesting games this past weekend featured the Big 12. We haven't talked about them too much this year, but this was a good game to keep your eye on. The Iowa State Cyclones, who at this time were ranked 25th, took on the Texas Longhorns. The Longhorns, an up-and-down team, able to put together a few wins here or there, and then a loss, and then a few more wins, and then a loss. And the ranking for Iowa State at number 25 was last weekend. The Texas Longhorns, however, were able to keep their foot on the gas and keep Iowa State down, and Texas pulled out the win 24-10. And that concludes Week 12. We look ahead to Week 13. This is the final weekend of regular season football here in the collegiate football world. After this, we will see some conference football championship games being played. And then we take a small break, and then bowl season will start. We will have a couple shows dedicated solely to the bowl selection results and for the conference championship games. A couple games to take a look at this weekend if you're going to be around the old TV after Thanksgiving. Friday night will feature a college football game, and a fairly decent one. The 8-2 West Virginia Mountaineers, who are 13th in the country, will take on the Oklahoma Sooner, who are 10-1 and sitting at number 6 in the country. This is a big Big 12 matchup. The winner of this is probably going to win the Big 12 outright. You can catch this game Friday, November 23rd at 8 p.m., and it will be broadcast on ESPN. The battle for the Apple Cup will take place this weekend. For those of you who don't know what the Apple Cup is, that features the Washington and Washington State game. The Washington Huskies, who are 8-3 and 16th in the nation, will take on Washington State, who is 10-1 and number 8 in the nation. That game is also Friday, November 23rd. You can catch that at 8:30 p.m. And the big game, of course, this next weekend, the one that everybody's going to talk about, the one that's going to make or break the seasons for one of these teams. The Michigan Wolverines, sitting at 10-1, number 4 in the country, will travel to Columbus to take on the Ohio State Buckeyes, who are also 10-1 and sitting at number 10 in the country. This game will be played Saturday, November 24th, with a noon kickoff, and you can catch this game on Fox. Right now, the odds are Michigan under 4 with the over-under at 56.5. This game is going to be a tough matchup for either or. Ohio State has been asserting itself over Michigan for the last decade or so. I have a hard time believing Michigan's going to be able to travel to Columbus, walk into Ohio State Stadium, push Ohio State around in front of Ohio State's home crowd, and walk out with a victory. I think that's too much to ask. I don't think Harbaugh has it this particular year. He's almost there, but it is my opinion, and I could be wrong and probably will be, that the Ohio State Buckeyes will beat the Michigan Wolverines, knock the Wolverines out of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, and the Ohio State Buckeye will go on to play in the Rose Bowl, or in the Big Ten Championship first. Speaking of that, their opponent, or Michigan or Ohio State's next opponent in the Big Ten title game, is going to be Northwestern. The Wildcats, sitting at 7-4, 19 in the country, will be taking on the Fighting Illini, the University of Illinois, who are 4-7 and are not playing very well, and haven't been playing very well all season. This game will be broadcast Saturday, November 24th. On the Big Ten Network with a 3:30 scheduled kickoff time. The 2 more games on the docket before we check over to the Heisman Hopefuls. Number 7, LSU will take on the number 22 Texas A&M Aggies. The Aggies sitting at 7-4, LSU 9-2. This game will be played Saturday, November 24th, and is scheduled for a 7:30 kickoff time. This particular game can be caught on the SEC network. And the final game to take a look at is a game out west. So if you're over here on the East Coast or in the Midwest like I am, it might be a little bit late for you, but you should check it out anyways. The Utah State Aggies, who are sitting at 10-1, and that one loss is to the Michigan State Spartans. Wow, who would have thought that would have held up? Take on the number 23 Boise State Broncos, who are sitting at 9-2. This game will be broadcast Saturday, November 24th at 10:15 p.m. So tune to ESPN if you'd like to catch this particular game. All right, real quick, with a minute and a half left, we will go over our Heisman hopefuls, the top 4 Heisman Trophy candidates in the country. Pretty much the same from last week. Number 1, the quarterback from Alabama, Tua Tagovailoa. His 2018 season stats so far are 2,865 yards passing, 31 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, with 185 yards on the ground and 4 touchdowns to complement. Number 2 is the quarterback from Oklahoma, Kyler Murray, still my favorite to win it. His 2018 season record or stats are much better than Alabama's quarterback. 3,310 yards passing, 34 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 739 yards rushing with an additional 10 yards rushing on the ground. I don't know why this guy isn't number 1 other than the fact he's on a team that has 1 loss. Number 3 is the quarterback from Washington State, Gardner Minshew. He's played very, very well. His 2018 stats are even better than Kyler Murray's. 4,325 yards passing, 36 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 92 yards rushing, and 3 rushing touchdowns for the 2018 campaign. And to round out the top 4 with 20 seconds left, Will Grier, quarterback from West Virginia. 2018 stats, 3,325 yards passing, 33 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, negative 68 yards rushing with 2 touchdowns. All right, 5 seconds left. Thank you for listening. Be sure to check out our NFL edition